LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Lydia. Today, we're going to step away from our usual thing. We're going to talk about volunteering, what it is, how people gain satisfaction from it, and what makes somebody stay committed, come all the way from the country that they're living in, go into another continent entirely, just to serve, just to make life better for another person. The dictionary says it means freely offer to do something. And even though our services are free, we know a lot of times we hear for the need for money. And sometimes I resist giving the money because I'm not quite sure how it's spent. We know the bigger organizations have a good job on calling on us, but how do the little ones survive? How do the little NGOs survive? Today, I've got a gentleman who's going to talk about his work, talk about himself, talk about how he stays motivated, how he raises funds, and why he does what he does. Please join me as we welcome Dollin Holt.
Hello.
Hi, Dollin. Thank you for joining me this evening.
Thanks for having me.
So before we sort of go into the mainstay of the conversation, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Well, as the name implies, I'm Dollin Holt. I am in the daytime. My day job is as an employment or work coach, as we call it at the local job center. Mm-hmm. But I use my other time in doing a lot of charity work. In fact, I have an organization that I have registered. We've been on for about 14 years now. It's known as the Caprecon Foundation, mm-hmm. and I founded it myself. It's also been funded by myself because, like you rightly mentioned, the small charities or small organizations struggle with getting funding. You know, the big boys are the ones that people know about so much. You see them on TV, mm-hmm. news, and the rest of them on the social media. But we're very small, so we're struggling. You know.
Okay. Well, 14 years is a really long time to.
It is a long time, yes. It started very small.
To have managed and done and continue to serve as you have been serving. So what does your organization do?
We're entirely about well, the background is developmental. So we work with refugees or IDP people mm-hmm. who are stranded in refugee camps, or refugees who are struggling to settle in their new homes. We can actually reach out to them and offer some help. But essentially, what we do is also about education and training. So we help young people from very poor homes back in Africa or some other places whose parents are so poor they can't afford to send a child to school. We may step in every now and then to pay for uniforms, school fees, mm-hmm. and ensure that the child gets education, or the children of that particular home get education. Now, this could happen as a result of conflicts. People, are facing conflicting situations, or people mm-hmm. who have been driven out of their homes because of conflict. People who were impoverished by natural disasters, emergencies. Mm-hmm. And then once we can help, we do help. Yes.
Okay. So you are talking of something quite big. Is not. I'm not saying that people who maybe specialize in children being abused or maybe men who, are drinking or have had some kind of trauma. You are talking about actually something on a much bigger scale. So refugees are usually people who have been driven out of their home country, really either by war or by some kind of natural disaster. And
That's
they
right.
kind of go into the nearest country
Yes.
to avoid the conflict, either the war or the hunger or, whatever is going on in their country. And the neighboring country usually are the one who gets hit by it.
Yes.
I'm sort of talking from experience, because from the Syrian war, on the Lebanese border, there are loads of Syrians who have struggled to come into, the next country that is just next to them, and there are actually people living in what we call refugee camps, which is really, really a rough time, because people have left homes, they've left jobs, they're now homeless, they're cold, they're without shelter. So it's a big task. And, we kind of hear that governments are sending aid, they're sending help into the refugee camps, but I'm not sure if a lot of people have been into one before. So can you describe what a refugee camp looks like? Because we kind of see it on the news, and we get glimpses and we just think, oh, poor people. But this is actually their life. Even I think we had it in the UK, also from Syria, when people were stuck between the UK and France, and we talked a lot about Calais and the people living in, in sort of tents in Calais. So it can happen in any country. So give us an example of what it looks and feels like in a refugee camp.
Thank you. I think we have to go back to actually trying to identify who a refugee is, or what refugeehood really means. Okay. Now, the UN 1945 definition of a refugee is a person who is fleeing persecution, so to speak, the fear of being harmed or even killed or something like that. So that is the UN or the universal definition of who a refugee is. But then over the years, it has broadened to include a number of other people who may be facing other forms of threats to their lives. So yes, so they could be fleeing from their country. So it could be, like I said, a war situation where two groups of people are in a war. And now let's use Nigeria, for example. We have what they call the internal war within the northern part of the country. You have Boko Haram threatening people's lives, even killing them. So these people have had to flee to neighboring places, like you mentioned. They become what they call IDPs. They're not really defined as refugees, but they're known as internally displaced persons.
Okay.
They are like refugees. They are fleeing the same thing, the same threat to their lives. But because they haven't crossed their borders to go to another country, they're known as IDPs because they're within the same country. While refugees are people who have actually flown away, or perhaps run away from their countries to go to other places to seek a refuge or to seek succor. Okay. One of the reasons for a person becoming a refugee, like I said, is persecution. A person can be persecuted because of the fact that he is different. He may have a different sexual orientation. He becomes, a threat to, or his life now represents a huge amount of threat, because people wouldn't want to, some societies wouldn't want to associate with him because of his sexual orientation or because of his beliefs or what he believes in. His political views can make him a refugee. Any situation that actually threatens your life can turn you into a refugee. But you become a refugee only after you've fled the borders of your country to another place. If you're within the same country, then of course you're known as the same country, and you've flown away. You've left your place of your home to seek refuge somewhere within the same country. You become what they call an IDP. So we have, just for example, recently, going back to your question, how does a refugee camp look like? I was in Nigeria just barely 4 or 5 weeks ago. I came back on the 12th of November. So I was there from the 15th of October. And one of the places I went to was a refugee camp in the outskirts of Abuja in the north. You know, these are camps holding people who are so who are fleeing,
Who are fled.
fleeing persecution or interested alive by the Boko Haram and other insurgents. You know, so they're there. The camp itself is honestly they're happy to be there because it's safer than home. But you could tell psychologically that they're not really, they're not really themselves. You know, there are schools provided for children. There are food provided for people who are hungry. But even then, while it feels safe to be there, it doesn't really feel like home. So there's the trauma of leaving your home, the psychological effects of fleeing your home, and then the psychological effects of being attacked. Some of them have been attacked already, raped, beaten, So it's not a place that I'm looking for a better word to use. It's painful, what you see on TV is I think it's even worse when you see it live than what you see on TV. Because
so what we see on TV is bad, because we can't say that what we see isn't bad. But what you're saying is that when you see it,
when you experience it yourself,
when you have the real experience, it's something.
You have the real feel of it. We watch TV, 5-10 minutes, the whole thing is gone, and there's another news. But this is what is sustained. You're actually there. You're seeing human beings living the way they're living in shelters made of plastic, a piece of clothing here, anywhere they can put their head and sleep. So it drives you. It makes you want to think about what have we done to our lives? Why have we why can't we live in peace? A lot of questions, political questions, begin to come to your mind. And how can you help? In my case, because I have a background in what they call psychosocial, help or psychosocial assistance, I was able to talk to refugees in a form of counseling. Now, in cases where these people would require, what they call, a deep amount of counseling, we could make referrals to counselors who are in the camps as well, who can actually qualified counselors, But there are different stages in which you can help. You can actually talk to them because sometimes they want to talk. They need someone to listen to their own view. But our approach in Caprecon, which is my organization, is very different because most often people in refugee camps, I think, are treated as numbers. But our approach is different because we see the human being. We talk to them. If we can afford it, we'll travel to these camps. Even if it's 10 or 50 people we see, there are a lot more of them. We feel that we've done something to a part of humanity.
Okay.
So
when you see them, what is your what is the benefit to them?
The benefit to them is that you're showing empathy. You're actually feeling it as if it's happening to you. So empathy is one. Listening is the second one. I think the third one is the fact that you're giving them agency. You're making them, speak for themselves rather than being spoken about or spoken to. You listen to them. You ask them they know what their pains are, and they know what the right solution should be. You understand? So those three elements, among others, is very important. Empathy, attentive listening, and then giving them the agency to speak for themselves, making them feel they're human beings. They're not just numbers. They're human beings. They know what is good for them, Yes. Some of them will tell you, look, I'm really happy here because I'll have been dead if I was in my village. Some will tell you, I'm not happy to be here. I'd rather be in my home, So you hear all kinds of human responses to emergencies. And then the element of talking to them alone gives them some kind of power they don't have mostly in the camps, because they're there to be helped, so they have no power. But when you're empowering them by giving them a voice to speak. So that's quite crucial to the refugee or the IDP situation in a camp. And thirdly, I think I've named 3 points. And fourthly, the idea that you're there alone makes them feel that they're not on their own. There is somebody who's here with me. There's somebody as a human being who thinks I matter in this world, who feels my humanness, things like that.
Okay, I think what you just said actually is quite powerful, because really what we really hear about refugees are numbers.
Yes.
All like on the news, all is quoted is there are
ticking boxes,
2,000, sometimes not even naming women and children. It's just that we assume there are 5,000 displaced people. I don't know how many UIDs. So it kind of dehumanizes them. So they're now sort of taken to a really low level, like we're just counting numbers. But these are people who I think sometimes we forget, and there is sometimes our imagination that refugees like on the bottom of the spectrum of the society, but I'm sure you have come across where they were actually like doctors, lawyers, teachers, nurses, people who, had professions, were going to work, were working in universities, in bankers, who, because of war and conflict or sexuality, of religion, even faith is one really quite powerful thing that causes people to be eroded and sort of escaping for their lives. And they go from quite up there in society all the way down, and all they literally have is the fact that they're no longer in danger of death.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And they're kind of living on aid, on help. And they have actually, I think we forget that they actually have only the bare minimum essentials when they're in the camps. They have very little clothes. They just have a little space to sleep. And sometimes I always wonder how safe it feels.
I'm glad you mentioned the word the safety. That's one point I was going to come to, But let's go back to some of the factors you just raised. How people can be reduced to nothingness in their lives. These are people who were bankers, like you mentioned, politicians, political leaders, people who were teachers, lecturers, and name all the professions, you'll find them there. But then one day everything just evaporates, everything just goes away. So this is where the pain is most for them. The fact that they've lost everything, and that they've lost hope as well. Now they come to this refugee camp. They want to be given an element of give them back their humanity, make them feel like humans. Do not treat them as just numbers or boxes to be ticked off. They want to feel that humanness again, that humanity again. Now that's where you find issues like trauma, depression, developing. The fact that they flee their countries or their place of their home alone is enough to cause a lot of psychological problems, But that you're not treating them, you're there's a word for it.
Re-traumatizing them.
Re-traumatizing them by treating them as just things to be just like numbers. I keep using the same word, numbers, statistics. They're more than statistics. They're more than numbers. They're human beings. Give them their human agency. Make them feel that irrespective of the fact that they've done refugees, they're still humans, Give them hope. Give them something to hope for. That's our approach, And you said again, anything can cause you to become a refugee. Your religious beliefs. We mentioned sexual orientation, but then there's also your faith. Your religious belief can turn you into a refugee. People will turn against you for what you believe in. There are a lot of factors that can actually lead a person to become a refugee or an IDP. So we need to address those things. And how do you address them? You need to be talking to these people, make them feel, because talking alone, listening to them, has a way of relieving them of some of the inner pain. The idea that another human being from somewhere else is listening to them. So that's some of the things we do, sitting down in circles, talking about, and then I think you asked a question about how I got into all this, which I didn't address, Maybe it's best to address it now before. I did a degree course in refugee studies at the University of East London, which is on what they call forced migration. It's a master's degree, a master's level course. When I did that, I felt that, well, I should put it into use. There's no point studying something and then not actually manifesting it in your life. So I took an interest in the lives of refugees, by visiting. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. So I took an interest. I tried to instead of just having a degree on your wall, try to see how these people actually are. Who are the refugees? Who are they? So I've been doing this for quite some time now, by studying refugee movements, seeing what I can do, even if I don't go to a camp, trying to stand in solidarity with them, through our websites and the rest of them. Okay, this really galvanized me into doing more because, and the challenges we have is the lack of funding. But then again, you do the best you can. When I went to Nigeria recently, I went with my own funds. I funded myself. I got some help from a few friends here and there. But it gives you a sense of satisfaction that you're actually putting into use what you studied, number one. And number two, you are acting to save or to help humanity,
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask what the therapist would ask. I mean, because from what you're saying, you studied a course and you thought, well, it kind of resonated with something inside of you, and you thought, well, let me see what I can do. What can I do with the little that I have?
Yes.
And I always tell people, when people complain a lot, I just say, like, you be the change. You be the change that you want to
see people. That's right. That's right.
And regardless of whether it looks like a mountain or not, at least you can start somewhere and somebody else can take it on. So what kind of led you to study that particular subject? Because it's quite abstract, like who makes a decision to study about refugees? Because this, the idea of refugees, it just feels like it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
And then if we want to actually feel better, we say it's the government's, it's their fault anyway. So let them sort the people out. So what kind of made you start on that trajectory?
Yes, what drove me to that trajectory, as you put it, is because there was a time I was watching. There was an event in the world. Was it in the 1990s? I'm trying to remember a particular upheaval somewhere in Africa where people flee their homes, and then we could see them on TV here in the West, being portrayed as people who have lost everything. No, there's something struck inside me, and think, how can the idea that one day you could lose everything and become a nobody in a no man's land, and how would you rebuild your life again? Because at the end of the day, there are two kinds of refugees: those who have decided, well, I'm not going back to that place again. That place will bring me more trauma or re-traumatize me. I could build a new life here. And there are those who are very bent on going back to where they came from, that one day they hope that one day things will become normal again. And that when that normalcy resumes, they want to go back to their homes. So I started studying these two perspectives, And then I had a luck of speaking to a refugee from Sierra Leone some years ago. In fact, there were 2 or 3 of them, and then some Sudanese refugees as well in North London. And I was asking them about their conditions. How do they? Where is home? Do they intend to go back home to the country that actually sent them away, or they want to build another home here in the UK? When I had this perspective, these 2 different perspectives, it struck me that people approach problems from different ways. Some of them see themselves as victims. Some others see themselves as opportunities to live a new life out of being a refugee. It sort of made me want to look at it intellectually, and that's why I enrolled on the course I did on the master's program in forced migration. Looking at it from a broader perspective, that's what galvanized me. Yeah, and then when I finished, I said, well, it's not enough to just study it. Why don't you see the refugee flows with your own eyes? How they settle down, their situations in the camp, how they eventually become, build a new home and live their lives. So I became so interested. Yes.
Yeah. I guess what you're talking about is actually the process, how it starts, what happens the in between, and I guess when people are accepted into a country, we know some are given permission to live in the country.
That's
some
right.
actually fight for a long time because they're no longer displaced. They're in a country, but they're not in the country. So they're living in
limbo. Yes.
So they're not allowed to work. They can't get a home. They're not allowed any of the rights of the country. So they're sort of not living in the camp, but they're living in a kind of camp.
That's right. That's right.
Side.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes some of those in camp are even living a better life than those who are no longer in the camp. They get a lot of help, a lot of consultation, food. But the ones who are left on their own, that are not in the camp, have more difficulties. To be honest with you, especially now, we live in a world where to be a refugee now is to be a kind of you're stigmatized. It's like you're you mentioned the word devaluation of their humanity. Devalued, you understand? We no longer see refugees as people who need our help. We see them as threats. So the media will say, the media will describe them as, as problems, as as sponges, all kind of negative descriptions, which then feeds into the population, and then they begin to see refugees as the people who are threatening their own lives. The refugee is not threatening their life. The refugee is someone who, unfortunately, becomes a refugee because what has happened to his place of birth or his home. So the media has not been very helpful in the refugee situation, or
because I think what happens is we see them as numbers on the news. We see them there, and then we hear. I'm using even the UK as an example. We hear X amount of them have been allowed in. I know some of them were not even allowed to settle in London. They had to settle further up north. But I think even when they're sort of struggling, they're trying to acclimatize. Some of them don't speak the language. They're not used to the cold. The food is something different. But I think the everyday person, which is what you're saying, then begins to see them as coming to take their jobs, not entitled to our taxes, and they're coming and the taxes are being spent on them. Or actually, we let them in and they're a threat to us. They're going to end up doing something to damage, to kill, to maim, to destroy. So we sort of lose, I think, along the way, our empathy for them. So when we hear of refugees, I'm using that word them, not that I mean them, but I mean I'm using it as an illustration.
I understand you.
So when we hear of something has happened in a country, the people are fleeing, they fled next door to whichever country is closest to them. We watching and listening are thinking, here we go again. Those poor people are going to get 100,000 people, if that, who is coming to impinge on them, coming to make life even more difficult for them or stretch them more. So you're right in saying that all those things that we are fed by the media then makes us unable to empathize or sympathize with them. We just look at them as them crossing over. But let's go back into the two type of immigrants that we have. I think whether they're refugees or not, I think it's quite applicable to immigrants in most countries.
Yes,
it's quite a clear split. There are some who believe this is an opportunity. I'm here to stay. I'm going to work, settle, marry, have my children, and die here. And then there's the other type of immigrant who spends half their time looking back. You know, looking back at sort of their home country, not will I call it their home country? Their original country, because where they're living now is their home country. And thinking, you know, I'm going to go back there sometime. You know, they kind of live in a dream. They're never actually in the here and now.
No.
They don't buy houses, they don't settle, or you go to their homes, it's stacked with stuff they are hoping to take back one day. And that one day, does it ever happen?
It never happened. It is. I think it's actually known. It's actually known in refugee studies as the myth of return.
The beast of return.
A myth entertained about returning, but it never, like a myth, or like all myths, it never happens.
Oh, okay.
Years after, they're still here, or they're still in in the host countries. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And
Because
that's the
there
only
is,
way. That's the only way they retain their their inner self, because these are the people who had a culture, who had a way of life,
Mhm,
and they want to preserve it.
mhm,
They don't want it, absorbed like a sponge
mhm,
into the bigger culture where they're in. They want to be themselves. So they will say, okay, yes, I'm going to buy a land back home and return and build a house. I'm going to do this. I'm going to, some of them, like you said, some of them even buy items which they will take back to the home country.
yeah, yeah,
But then
yeah.
it never happens.
Mhm,
That's the only way they can keep their sanity. They can maintain a contact with that home that they have left. You
mhm,
know, if you sever that contact, some of them can handle the psychological effect you know, of that severance, of the breakaway from their home. So if they preserve that memory, they preserve that way of thinking for the rest of their time in the host country. It so happens that some of them, the children of some of them, do return to that home, but it's not really their home. So they come back here.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
very,
Be-
it's a cycle.
yeah. Okay. So are you saying that if I sort of, as an immigrant, decide actually England is not my host country, it's going to be my home country. Yeah.
Yes.
This is
Mm.
where I live,
Hmm.
grow old, this is where I'm going to
Hmm.
die. I
Yeah,
am so scared that something in my inner self is going to change.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yes, yes.
So if I kind of live in some kind of denial that I'm going to go back someday, someday soon, uh, then I kind of preserve. But there are people who choose
Hmm.
to make the host country their home country,
Their homes. Yes,
who
yes,
keep
yes.
a measure of their culture, keep a
Hmm.
measure of their identity. They eat the
Yes, yes,
food, they wear
yes.
the clothes. But
Hmm.
it's quite
Hmm.
interesting that the children who live in the host country actually make it their home country.
Of course, of
Yeah.
course. They
So
don't know any other home. Yeah,
mhm. Because they have no kind of
no connection.
no other reference points except
That's
the
right.
stories that,
That's
their
right.
parents or
I've told
their
them.
aunts,
Yes.
their
Yeah.
uncles are
Yeah.
being told about,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
alleged home countries, but this is where they are. And I think it sometimes can stunt people's growth and development,
Yeah. It does.
because they
Yes.
aren't able to fully embrace,
Hmm.
the
Yes.
opportunities that they do have in what is the host country, which ideally should be
Yeah.
their home country.
It's true. A refugee at some point begins to understand his life that, look, my life now is this where I am now. There's
Mm-hmm.
no other home that I can return to, and that will
Mm-hmm.
depend on what they call how the host country receives you. If you're meant to feel as part of your new home, if you accept it, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, you begin to develop the idea of acceptance. Begin to see, well, I'm happy here. So what am I going back to the home that I've left behind? But if the reception is hostile,
Mm-hmm.
continuously hostile, you don't see yourself as part of the new home you've come to.
Mm-hmm.
You then build that relationship with the home. You renew it every day. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I feel my sense of dignity. That is my spiritual home. That's my real home, because I'm not accepted here. So
Mm-hmm.
acceptance and how you're welcome plays a huge role in the life of a refugee. Understand?
In the
Some of
choice that you
them,
make to stay or to
yeah,
feel like you belong.
yeah, exactly,
But
exactly.
is it really that easy?
It's not easy.
No,
It's
no,
not
like
easy. Even
I can be accepted, I could be welcomed, given,
mhm.
our new blue passport.
Yeah.
But is it so easy in the mind to like decide that this is the place?
Yeah, the human mind is a very, like yourself, Lydia. It's not easy to to interpret. People see situations in different ways. There are people who say, "I think I'm happy here. I'm not a victim. I'm happy. I'm a citizen. I have a new passport. Let me just build my home here." And there are some within
Mm-hmm.
who say, "No, this place will never be my home, because it's like I've lost something. Something has been taken away from my life." And then
Mm-hmm.
that would lead to what we call cultures of exile. Sorry, cultures of exile. So you begin to leave that home in your host country, the home that you want to return to. You don't physically return, but you return there in the way you conduct your life in the new place. So your culture is then represented in exile. If you go to some parts of London, I don't know how familiar you are, you see a whole population of people living as if they're in their home country. Here in Luton, if you go to a place called Berry Park, you will feel as if you're in Pakistan or somewhere, because the culture exists. The way they
parts of London that are called Little India.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
apart from the cold, you could be in India.
So we tend to call them flourishing cultures of exile. People they're leaving the home in the host country. There are those who are very detached. They wouldn't come out. They wouldn't be part of that mix because they have this very strong connection with the home. They want to go back there, in their thinking, but then it becomes a myth because returning is not easy. You can't return to that home again. It's not the way you left it. It's not frozen in time. The home you left has also changed. So sometimes you go, but they ask you, when are you going back to your new home? And you think you've come back to your home. So the idea of home,
it's quite unsettling, actually. And actually, when people do return to what they thought was their home country, they've kind of changed so much in the new country. They find it so difficult that sometimes they complain about the home country, about things that probably were in existence when they were there.
Exactly.
Now it becomes a bother because they're so used or so adapted to the new home country. But in their mind, they still refer to the other country as the home country. But when they go, they're so conflicted.
Honestly,
am I here? Who do I belong to? Where do I belong to? And sometimes I hear when people living in the UK now and come from originally were from a different country, and they no longer hold the passport for the other country, and then they have to get a visa to come to what was their birth country or where their parents are nationals.
It just happened to me.
So you get a visa to come to Nigeria?
I wanted to renew my old Nigerian passport. It became a problem, so I had to take a visa to go and visit.
So how did that feel like? How did that feel like? Because now
it felt I felt disconnected from the home that I call my home. I was made a foreigner. The idea that I could take a visa to visit that home made me a foreigner in my thinking. And you get to the country.
I think it works with this idea of
exactly
what
and
is
then you
acceptance.
get to you get to the country you call your home. You find that country has also changed, and you have changed yourself. So the idea of home is very fluid. It can be, things have changed. You have changed. The people there now see you as a stranger. Even some of them you went to school with, people they see you differently, and then you become a bit confused. Who am I in this world? Where's my place in this world?
But we like to feel like I haven't changed. Yeah.
Yes.
But somebody who is observing you will notice that you've changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was told that several times.
When they try to give us the summary, we are like, no, I'm still the same person.
I'm still who I am.
But you probably left that country when you were 15 or 20.
Exactly.
And there's been a gap of like 10, 15, 20 years, sometimes even more. But we resist the fact, we feel, no, we're still Ghanaian, we're still Sierra Leonean, we're still Cameroonian.
Exactly.
Despite the fact that you haven't lived in the country for like 20 years.
Honestly.
So, I guess we kind of understand how, and some of us left countries voluntarily. We weren't pushed out. We were not forced out. Some people even saw it as a lucky escape. They went on holiday to another country,
and then decided to stay.
And decided to stay. But I guess some of what we're talking about, the reason I kind of made it a little bit reflective on us, so that we can actually understand what happens when somebody is stuck outside their country, where they don't have control. where they become just a number. Where actually, I think in the camps, they decide when they eat. They can't eat when they like. There's a time where there's meal times. There's a portion of food that you get. So you can't be hungry and then just go to the refrigerator and get something to eat.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is taken away. So apart from the fact that they're not called prisoners because they can't leave the camp. They just can't go wandering across borders or anywhere. They're in some way almost like in prison, just a different. They didn't commit a crime. But they're held and really managed by a lot of restrictions. You know, if they miss the meal time, that's it. They probably won't get to eat. They don't see the doctors like we do. They don't have that option. So I think for us to understand that actually they're living quite in a plight compared to what we hear and just think, well, it's the government's problem. The government should solve it. Or they shouldn't actually let them in because they're coming to take something away from me. And it's actually funny when you hear immigrants talk about other immigrants like that.
That's the irony of it all, honestly. Some of the people, some of the people who are very vocal anti-immigrants, or people who are people who are themselves immigrants. It's an irony that I've not been able to deal with completely. How can you not see yourself in that person? Or how can you not see your history, your background in that person who's, you know?
Because I think that happened a lot with Brexit.
Yes.
Yeah, it happened a lot where the immigrants were really having a go and saying, no, we have to come out of Europe. We can't allow these foreigners to come in. And I'm watching people like, who are the foreigners?
I'm telling you. Some time ago, I had to remind someone.
At one time, it was the Irish, and then it was the West Indians, and then it was the Indians and the Pakistani, and now it's the Eastern European. Like, at what point did we forget that we're all, on some level,
at some point in time, we were immigrants, or one way or the other,
exactly,
in our history. If you consider,
we had a right
exactly,
and a chance, to stay. And now we feel we can't give somebody else that option.
Then we become so less tolerant of others, even when our history, tells us we were once immigrants, That's something that I struggle with most of the time. Where is your human sympathy for those who have gone through what you went through, or what your parents, your grandparents went through some time ago? Where, as human beings, we forget easily. We're very quick to forget, and that's one thing, And then even the refugee camps, I was going to say something, a phenomenon that's developing. There is no safety in most of these camps. It's now been penetrated by traffickers, human traffickers, people who go to the camps to prey on these poor people, especially the young girls, to become prostitutes. Using them as prostitutes. And that's one of the campaigns we're now leading, with my organization, in tandem with other organizations, the fight against human trafficking, you understand? Our website will be coming out today or within the week. I would encourage you to have a look as well, just in case we may have this opportunity again to talk more about it, you understand? There's the upsurge of human trafficking in refugee camps too. You have this people going there, penetrating, because refugee camps can be very porous. You can't fence it around.
Because there isn't.
So people can go in there, exactly, and use their influence, money, to influence these young girls. And some of them have become pregnant and have children in the camps. Because of this, they're exposed to a lot of dangers, a lot of human trafficking, and that's very mischievous people coming around there. You understand? So that's another thing, another campaign. Like I said, we're leading now. Not just the suffering they're into already, but the fact that they're now being exploited as well. Some of them do this in coalition with those who are supposed to be protecting them. Which is poverty can lead to anything. So there are a lot of challenges there in the camps as well. A lot of challenges.
Okay. All right, we're sort of coming to time. What would you like to leave us with, and where people can find you?
Yes, apart from thanking you for giving me this opportunity, I'd like to say that you have actually helped in making the world understand what a refugee is this evening. You may not know that, what an IDP is, and then the sufferings and all the things that comes with becoming to finding yourself a refugee. We have touched on them, and I hope that someone is listening. I hope that we're able to galvanize some kind of sympathy out there for people who come to seek our help, who come to seek refuge. They've not come here to take your money or to take your jobs. That's a myth. They've not come here to cause you any danger, although a few of them may have been so represented. They've come to simply ask for help, so that human help. If we can render some empathy, some support to these people, we are helping them to build their lives again, because their lives have been lost, so to speak. And don't forget, all through history, refugees have contributed to their host countries. They have become manufacturers. They have become industrial people. We have examples of them here in the UK. They have contributed immensely to the growth of the countries that became their homes. We should not always see them from the negative. There's also the positive as well, And then my name is Dollin Holt. Like I said, I am the founder of Caprecon Foundation. Our website will be out. We actually are rebuilding the website, so it's going to be out soon. But I can be reached with an email address. I'm prepared to leave my email on this platform if people want to talk to me. But then again, the easiest way would be just typing in CAPRECON, which is Caprecon Foundation. I think you will find .org. You'll find us on the internet. Okay. And then I was going to talk about how that name came about, but maybe that should be for another engagement. Yeah. I look forward to that. So right. Caprecon. Okay. Caprecon.org is our email. New website address. And then all other information, our phone numbers will be found in that place. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you for your time, and
Lydia, thank you so much. I hope I justified my invitation to this platform.
Yes. I'm sure people have learned a lot, and people would be having conversations and hopefully changing some of their
perspectives. I look forward to that. Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. What an interesting conversation about refugee, immigration, home countries, host countries, the minds behind it. Do we leave all of it to the governments, or do we do something ourselves to make a change? So you might not go into the refugee camps, but there are refugees everywhere in every country. Till we meet again, my name is Lydia Khalil. Thank you for watching and for listening and for subscribing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com.